Well, this year is the bicentennial of what is often called the Forgotten War, the War of 1812. Kentuckians played a significant role. In fact, 5 out of 6 Kentucky men of military age fought and suffered more casualties than soldiers from all other participating states combined. An astonishing 64% of American fatalities were Kentuckians, a statistic all the more remarkable when you realize that none of the battles were fought within our state. In Michigan, during a frozen and snow-filled January, hundreds of Kentuckians gave the ultimate sacrifice in a battle that became known as the Massacre on the River Raisin.
Kentucky played a tremendous role in the War of 1812. It disproportionately gave more of its sons in that battle than any other state in the Union.
Kentucky was an important state in its own right, but more than that, the Kentuckians were people who wanted to go off to the fight because they wanted to be a part of it. Somebody said there's something in the very air of Kentucky that makes Kentuckians a soldier and want to fight. And so there was that martial spirit left over from the earlier time when the frontier, when you had to fight. In 1812, Kentuckians were excited about war. They wanted war because they were coming out of the frontier period when the Indian threat had been great, and now the Indian threat had moved beyond the borders of Kentucky, but it was still a threat.
This whole Indian-British situation just really inflamed the Kentuckians just prior to the declaration of war. It brought back those old wounds, those old memories of what had occurred in the 1790s.
These two clashed because when the Indians fought the Kentuckians, and the Kentuckians fought the Indians, very few people took any pity on the other. Both took scalps, both butchered and killed, both committed atrocities. And because of that, Kentuckians were feared just as the Native Americans were feared.
Some British officers, in an attempt to justify the use of Indians by the British, the statement was made that the reason that the British used Indians during the War of 1812 was the fact that the Americans were using Kentuckians.
Over 1,000 Kentuckians, mostly militia, but some infantry, came north from Kentucky, Lexington area. They left in August and were dressed appropriately for the weather. But after fighting their way up here, battling both the climate and the rough terrain and Native Americans, they arrived here in the winter of 1813, January, when Michigan was experiencing a very, very cold winter.
It's a horrendous march. They're going through deep snow. They're not well equipped. They're not well dressed. They're not well clothed. They're not well supplied. They're not well armed in a lot of ways. They don't. Some of the ones who fought in the later fight only had 10 rounds of ammunition per person.
We probably had in the neighborhood of 100 Kentuckians that died due to starvation, due to the exposure to elements.
They hear of a British garrison that's well supplied with food and clothing, and they decide to try to capture this garrison. And the first Battle of Frenchtown takes place, where they do have a victory, and the Americans fight well. In the process, they rush up in a hurried way and don't fortify the position. They know the British are on their way, but they put people in open fields without any trenches or any kind of earthworks to protect them. And then on the morning of January the 22nd, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the attack comes from the British and the Indians as expected. This one wing of the army disintegrates almost and flees. General Winchester is captured. They're outmanned, outgunned, and they're massacred almost in the attacks. The other wing of the army is fighting very well, but they're running out of ammunition. They're surrounded by this time. The general has been captured, and a white flag comes out calling for their surrender. The defeat is complete. There have been about 1,000 Americans, and 500 are captured, maybe 400 more dead, maybe 100 got away.
The great controversy is whether or not the British did all they could to protect those who were unable to travel back to Fort Malden in Canada. Those who were so wounded or were unable to travel were left here in the care of physicians. The general belief was that they would be protected. The Kentucky troops were noted for having attacked every Indian village they came upon on their way here from Kentucky. So when an opportunity came to exact revenge, they took the opportunity.
The Indians just started going through these cabins and looting the cabins. Apparently, they start, going cabin to cabin to cabin and pulling out guys, shooting them, killing them. There was even instances where the Indians, if they couldn't drag the person out, set the cabin on fire.
The building they're in is set afire. Up to 65 are killed, and that becomes known as the Massacre of the River Raisin. There's a story that the Native Americans, after the battle, cut off the heads of about 100 of the Americans who'd been killed there and stuck them on a picket fence around the fort that their British allies were in. So as American soldiers went back, who'd been captured, went back and passed that fence, they saw the dead heads of those people who'd been fighting in that battle as well.
What happened here at the River Raisin is a lesson that impacted the country greatly. At the time it happened, General William Henry Harrison reported back that this was the greatest national calamity that could have occurred.
War of 1812 battle cry was "Remember the Raisin," and that was due to the massacre and the atrocities that occurred there for the Kentuckians. And so it became not only the Kentucky's battle call, battle cry, but the nation's for the War of 1812.
Because it is a forgotten war, and it's a second American Revolution in a lot of sense. It did win America the respect that the nation wanted and deserved and desired, and we need to give those people who fought in that war the same kind of remembrance.
Kentuckians have totally lost sight of the significance of the War of 1812 and the impact that it had on the Commonwealth, and still does today. There are 31 counties in the state of the 120 counties that we have that are connected in some manner with the War of 1812.
This is a pivotal battle and point in American history that is exemplified by the River Raisin National Battlefield. The people of the state of Michigan are tremendously grateful to the citizens of Kentucky for what they did here on the battlefield, and are pleased to memorialize them by flying the flag here, and have erected a memorial to a number of their sons who were lost in downtown Monroe.
War of 1812, the Star-Spangled Banner had 15 stars and 15 stripes. That 15th star and that 15th stripe was the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
This year, Kentuckians will have plenty of opportunities to learn more about the War of 1812. A specially appointed Bicentennial Commission is planning several statewide events and exhibits. Now, one of their focuses will be raising awareness about the significant roles of both Native Americans and African Americans in the war. Well, thanks for joining us here at Mounddale Manor in Winchester, and we'll look for you again next time right here on Kentucky Life.